the East End garden parties was one of the highlights of the island. We actually came home just to go to the East End garden parties, to go to Warren Stage to show off our nylon shirts and our gardenia pants and the stage and so forth. We actually came home to just to go to Warren Stage, and but before we left the island to go off to sea, you had to get to East End on trucks. On the back of trucks, they would have wood across the trucks, and they would have a little cushion to sit on, and you carry your suitcase with your clothes to change. And people said to me, "Well, you carried a suitcase to East End?" Like, and I told kids that. I said, "Yes, because there were no paved roads. The roads are all marl, and it was so dry, and the side of the road looked like snow, because all the marl dust would get on the trees." And the truck would be going up and down. The road was so bad, it would sometimes take an hour and a half to get to East End. And when you got there, you had to go and change your clothes. And that's why people knew each other from the different districts, because you had to have, a family that you were connected to go and change your clothes.
Yeah. You didn't just go to East End randomly. You had a connection.
A few moments later.
This member would like Dr. McField to explain to the public the suitcase that was brought up with the clothes to change. What was it that went back down from the stand in those suitcases?
He told me off air.
So, off air? Why didn't he? Well, this honorable member wants to find out, why did he not expose that part? So I gave it to him to see whether he wants to commit,
because they weren't banned in those days, right? You could hang them out on your line in those days, right? It wasn't there was no restriction on catching them then, right?
Yeah, right.
Doc.
Well, it's because the grouper season also came simultaneously to the garden party, and the groupers East Enders would go and catch the groupers by the hundreds, 200s. The grouper was a sort of a lifeline all over the island. People would come from all over the island to get the grouper from the Coxswain grouper, they called it, from East End. And what the East Enders did, because there were no refrigerating apparatuses in those days, and so they had to preserve the fish when they caught it, because everybody had the fish. Just about everybody had a canoe and a catboat into East End and went fishing and catch the fish, huge fish, small fish. And what they did, they found a way to preserve the fish by salting it and hanging it out to dry in the sun on the lines. And they would make long lines, like clotheslines, and they would dry the grouper. They would scotch the grouper up, cut it up, scotch it, what they call scotch it, and they would salt it and hang it to dry. And when the grouper was dry like that, when it was preserved and salt, you could eat it raw. You could roast it. And of course, we had a lot in those days. You had a lot of what they call nor'easters. Nor'easters was nor'easters. The wind coming from the northeast, but we used to call them nor'easters, where around Georgetown and West Bay, you could not use the North Sound for fishing, and so you had to rely on getting the grouper and stuff from East End, and people would go up there, like and around garden party days, they would go to the garden party in the daytime. They would go to the concert in the night, and then they would go to the dances after the concert. And like I said, they had to take their suitcases with them because of the dust and stuff to change their clothes, but they didn't come back with an empty suitcase. They would take people's grouper off the line, and they would fill their suitcases with the grouper off the line and bring it back to Georgetown. and so I understand that sometimes East Enders would stay up all night watching their yard, because especially when it came on when the garden party came on a moonlight night, where people could see.
Wow.
And you could smell the grouper on the trucks when you were coming down from East End.